Welcome to Something More to Podcast, where we move through topics wherever the conversation takes us. I'm your host, Adam Culbertson.
And I'm Richard Collins.
So something that's been on my mind a lot recently, because it can affect me. If they pass laws to basically outlaw being mentally ill. I mean, that's the way I'm seeing it right now. If this is your first time listening, I have schizophrenia. I'm actually schizoaffective, so it's I have schizophrenic symptoms with hallucinations, delusions. But on top of that, I also have bipolar symptoms with mood swings and everything involving that, and not being able to control my emotions and which direction they want to go at any point. So one of the new things, I guess it's not really new. By the time we're recording this, it's just been on my mind. It's been bothering me. But specifically, like Lindsey Graham, the senator for South Carolina, is yeah yes. He is like the head runner of this, and Trump has given him 100% support on it, of mentally ill people that basically taking our rights to bear arms, to own firearms away from us for just being mentally ill. Just based on what a doctor thinks, which, I mean, yes, doctors can have their opinions and everything. And if you do have a mental illness, definitely consult your doctor, be open about your symptoms and how you're feeling and everything like that. But I mean, I have had some experiences where I was not suicidal. I didn't want to hurt myself. I didn't want to hurt anybody else. I was so miserable at the time, and this was back in like 2013. I didn't see the point of living with how miserable I was, and I was just telling my doctor that, my psychiatrist, and they wanted to hospitalize me. And with the way the current system is, they couldn't hospitalize me against my will or whatever, my wishes.
Right. You were still deemed to have cognitive function. Yeah. And so that you were still in charge of your own will to be able to say, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah. But they said they wanted to. And if, like, I don't know, like, if that happened if this gets passed, that we get our weapons taken away before we ever commit a crime, like not even threatening to commit a crime with a weapon, just because a doctor says that, oh, they shouldn't have a weapon, just take that away. And they're talking about confiscating. And I mean, this is being like led by the party that says, oh, well, the Democrats are going to take your guns away, but then the Republicans turn around and they try to take our guns away.
Now, see, one thing that I will say to all of this is that there are definitely some situations where we need to be more proactive about gun control.
Oh, totally.
And there are definitely situations where people are in a mental state where they're unsafe with guns. That being said, I think the biggest problem with this proposed legislation is a lack of definition. And that's a real problem with all kinds of legislation, is lack of definition. Because if you don't actually define these terms, if you don't actually define what this does and doesn't mean, it's just basically asking for it to be abused or manipulated in the future for whatever purposes. And who knows? Maybe that's their end goal. Maybe they want it to be abusable. But when it's all said and done, you can't just say, oh, well, mental illness, and just say, okay, well, everybody who has mental illness falls under this. Because mental illness is a very broad spectrum. Like, yes, there are people who are mentally ill that are a serious danger to themselves and others just at any given time. But there are also people that are mentally ill that have no violent urges. They're not going to hurt anybody. And when it all comes down to it, they're mostly normal and just have times where they just don't feel right. Things just don't make sense to them. I mean, it's just like it's not just a whole black and white thing. It's not sane or insane. Like, there's this whole gradation in between. Like, it's not so simple that you can just say, oh, well, everybody that's mentally ill, we need to just take away their guns or just lock them up just because we feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a big part of, like, a lot of the mental institutions that were shut down for, just for horrible acts that they were committing, just human rights violations and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
Now on that, like, within the same week that I mean, this was a few weeks ago when I originally saw that Lindsey Graham was wanting to do this. And I'm not saying that it's just Republicans that are behind this. There are some Democrats behind it too. I don't know all the names. I just know Lindsey Graham specifically because he's the head runner of it.
And it's kind of pertinent to you.
Yeah. And then also Trump saying that he gives 100% support behind this, and it terrifies me. Because if they can just take away my rights like that, what other rights? Like my freedom. Like I could lose my freedom because I'm mentally ill, and I had one instance where I welcomed death, but I wasn't suicidal. Like, could that take away my freedom? Mm-hmm. What if that happens to me again? And I'm not suicidal. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I'm so depressed that I don't see the point of living. I mean, I'm still alive today. It's 2019, and I'm still alive even after going through that. Mm-hmm. And I feel that way sometimes, and it's the way it is. But like within like a few days of finding out that they're trying to do this, Trump goes on. I watched an actual video of him in front of his helicopter talking about wanting to open up all these mental institutions back up and get our mentally ill back in the institutions.
Well, the thing is, none of those institutions ever helped anybody.
No.
Like, those institutions were never designed to try and help people or alleviate their symptoms or, make them better. Like, those institutions were only really there to keep them out of the public for everybody else to feel better.
Yeah. And he was like, even in that little interview with all the media, he was like, oh, it's not a prison. It's not a prison. But we need to get all of our mentally ill back in institutions. Like, and he's like, we shouldn't have shut him down. No, we should have. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. And it's just, they're just supporting the stigma that we're dangerous people. Mm-hmm. When the reality of it is, most people that have schizophrenia are not a danger to anybody. Like, they're mostly a danger to themselves if they are suicidal, but that's not everybody.
For that matter, I actually saw there was a study done that, and this is probably something I should read more into, and just would be interesting to read into anyway. But there was a study done showing that the culture surrounding you actually dictates a lot about the way that your schizophrenia manifests. So, for example, like in the U.S., there's this whole culture around like violence and things like that. And so schizophrenics in the U.S. tend to have more violent hallucinations, whereas in like say India, like schizophrenics tend to have more like happy, upbeat hallucinations.
Yeah.
So I mean, to even just say like, oh well, schizophrenia, they're obviously violent, like that doesn't mean anything. Like
no, and when my symptoms first came on, they were non-violent. They were actually kind of comforting.
mm-hmm.
They turned to violent to the point that they were attacking me and like completely leaving me debilitated on the floor, crying, throwing up, all that kind of stuff.
And I cannot imagine, I cannot help but imagine that the entire culture in the U.S. surrounding that stigmatization of mental illness is at least part of to blame for that change.
Yeah.
It's that kind of subconscious sense of like people out to get you because there are people that kind of are.
Yeah. And it definitely doesn't help me whenever I get on Reddit or just go to some of the worst ones are like I go in the comment sections of news articles, and some of the worst ones are like Fox News.
Yeah.
The comments there, I'm not talking about the articles themselves, but they bring up that, oh well, this person has mental health issues or has a history of mental health issues or is now diagnosed with schizophrenia or something like that. And then people in the comments are like, well, we need to just put them all down. We need to kill them all, and just all that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff gets to me. Sometimes it sends me into episodes where I'm hallucinating or have a lot of paranoia where I don't want to leave the house because I'm afraid that like people are going to see me in Walmart or just a store in general, and they're going to notice like my crazy twitches and stuff like that I know probably nobody notices but me. But
I'm telling you, they don't, because they're too worried about their own little nervous tics and twitches.
So it worries me. Like it's an irrational fear, I know. But whenever stuff like this, like wanting to open up all these institutions and get our mentally ill back in there and taking away our rights as American citizens when we've committed no crime to lose our rights, it makes me more paranoid, and it's not helping the situation. And I feel like I'm in a better situation than a lot of people are, on how I've learned how to live with it within a limited safety bubble that I've created around myself.
Right.
So it's kind of, it just makes it harder, and my bubble gets smaller.
It's just, when it all comes down to it, it's the same kind of thing that we talk about a lot. It's that whole bigotous attitude of just grouping people into these nice, neat little packages that predefine everything about a person, so you don't have to worry about it or think about it. And that kind of attitude, I mean, it just doesn't have any place in the modern world. I mean, you're basically just saying, oh, well, because there was a person who was mentally ill that went and shot up a bunch of people, then obviously everyone who has any kind of mental illness is going to try and shoot up a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like saying, well, there's a couple of white guys who shot up a bunch of people, so obviously we should just kill off every white male because they're just going to shoot up people.
Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it's villainizing us, which leads to people not seeking treatment. That's another concern that I have, is there's so many people out there. I have a family member that will not go and get any treatment, won't even get diagnosed, but I mean, has talked to me about the symptoms that they have, and I'm like, look, you need to see a mental health professional. You need to try and get on some kind of medication. I totally am for people taking medication, even though I don't for for the side effect reasons that I've had myself. But I've learned to, like I said, I've learned to live with it. I can't live a normal, like go out and work a normal job or anything like that, but I've learned to just survive with what I can. But his reason for not going is because I won't be able to own a gun. Doesn't even own a gun. But his fear is he won't be able to buy a gun if he wants one.
I mean, in a certain way, I mean, that kind of can be a big deal because, I mean, it's losing a right. Like, it's losing something that should be just a given right to any citizen of the United States. Like, you know, like, and having something like that taken away from you is basically like saying, oh, well, you're not like everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, everybody else gets this, but not you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of shitty, and it just makes the problem worse. This isn't how you fix mental illness. No. Like, another big reason that people don't do it is because it costs so fucking much to see anybody, to get medication. It costs so much money. And if you are dealing with an illness like this, I mean, some people can't go and work a normal job, and they can't make the money to pay for this stuff, which is why I am for universal health care, because that will help mental illness. Overall, it can help mental illness. And people won't be as afraid to go to the doctor and get checked out and figure out what's going on so they can make progress to getting better.
Right. And I feel like, especially these days, you know, thankfully they've done away with the like sanitariums and everything. But I feel like that same kind of attitude of, well, let's just kind of cover all of this up and hide it and not really try and deal with the root problem, still exists. It's like the whole idea of like overprescribing. Like I feel like that's kind of just the go-to solution for any kind of mental disorder or illness is just, oh, well, let's just drug them up until they can't do anything anymore.
Yeah. And that's how I felt on medication. And I'm not against medication because it does help some people.
Oh, it absolutely does. But that doesn't mean that it needs to be handed out for anybody that has any kind of mental disorder.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've even talked to other people who have gone through that, and they were medded up for years, and they finally got to a point where they were off the meds, and it was just like, you know, like, I don't even know who I was during the time that I was on meds.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what I went through. Like, I felt like I was trapped. Like, I was still in there somewhere, but I was trapped, and I couldn't get out. It was just a living shell just moving along and basically a zombie just going on and just doing things like a quote-unquote normal person would do. But I completely lost me. I lost my sense of self. I lost my imagination, my just my thought process. Like, I was just going through the motions.
And it's not to say that, you know, that's going to be the case for everybody.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that you can't just, you know, throw a bunch of meds on it and say, oh, okay, well, it'll be fine now.
Yeah.
Like, there's just not enough focus on actually treating the actual root problems.
Yeah. And the medications are what actually led me to hitting that point of depression to where I was welcoming death.
Well, I mean, you look at like any kind of like mood stabilizer drug or like any kind of like anything to do with the mind, like your Zolofts or whatever, like all of that kind of stuff. Like, every time they show those commercials in the whole like rundown of like, you know, what you may experience, like thing, every single one of them, like, they have like depression or thoughts of suicide listed in those side effects.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. And
like, I never lost all my symptoms through all that. I just became numb to them. that's really all the medications did. Was I was still seeing shadows. I was still hearing noises, but I was just so numb to it that I wasn't reacting like mentally or physically to it. But that was just me. That's not necessarily the case for everybody, because like I don't know everything about every mental illness out there, but schizophrenia specifically, every single person with schizophrenia has their own things going on. Yeah. There may be similarities, but one person with schizophrenia is not going to be the same as the next person.
Yeah, no, obviously not.
So one treatment isn't going to work for everybody.
Like, I mean, for some people, it's going to be more just in the form of like auditory hallucinations. For some people, it's going to be more visual hallucinations. Like, some people, it might actually be well-defined voices telling them things or telling them to do things.
Yeah.
For some people, it might not even be defined. It's not like you could discern any real meaning out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, I think the lack of understanding, the lack of perspective, and people just wanting to basically brush it all under the rug and not worry about it, that's kind of exacerbating the issue, to where it's hard to even want to admit that you have a problem, and even if you do, it's hard to actually get legitimate help.
Yeah, I mean, I've brought it up on previous episodes on what led me to not wanting to accept that I had schizophrenia. It led me not wanting to seek treatment. I was afraid to seek treatment because it had been. I had a great aunt that had mental illness. I don't know exactly what she had, but she was hospitalized. It was even in a padded room in a straitjacket at one point. But like my family trash talked her. Like they made fun of it. They joked about it. And I was a kid. So that's just what I was hearing. I didn't have any knowledge of mental illness at the time. I mean, I was in like fifth grade.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't unless, you happen to read it somewhere or somebody told you.
Yeah, and that's not what I was hearing. I was just saying, oh, crazy aunt, I'm being told another family member has bipolar disorder, and that they just lost their mind and everything. And I mean, I know it's different now. Like, I know better now. Like, it took me a long time to actually like accept it myself, and then like research it and try to figure it out so I could get better. To the point that I could like look back on their actions and how it affected me negatively, and being able to forgive them because I mean, just empathy and understanding what they were going through.
Right.
And that's what we're lacking in this country. It's what we're lacking with this whatever. With them trying to pass laws, like they are lacking empathy for what the real problem is. And that's a big problem with people that don't have a mental illness and are lacking empathy to understand it, or laziness to look into it, to find out what it really is like. And then it leads to stuff like getting our rights taken away because we have something that we can't control, but we're not harming people.
Yeah.
But the fear is there that we are going to harm somebody because they've been told that crazy people are dangerous.
And just allowing things like that to continue is just making things worse and worse. And, as reluctant as you were to even, say anything about it early on, think about how much worse that would be if sanitariums were still a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
like the threat of you just being thrown in a padded cell was a real possibility.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't be talking about it. I probably wouldn't even be here. I probably would be institutionalized because of where I was when all this started.
And I mean, it's just like nobody's getting help that way.
No,
like you're not helping anyone.
Like that's my biggest fear, is to being hospitalized against my will. That is my biggest fear.
I mean, it's just even when you're watching shows like because there's a few shows that have done scenes like that where, like either an episode or like sometimes with like movies that cover, you know, people being caught in an institution, and either because they legitimately like have some kind of mental disorder, or because they were misunderstood to and they were just thrown in there even though, you know, they don't have any kind of disorder.
Yeah. And,
you know, the horror that kind of thing brings on.
Yeah. Forced on medications that can fuck you up if it's not right for you, but you don't have any choice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then that just understanding that comes with it, that it's like, oh, well, no matter what he says, he's just either lying or delusional.
Yeah. And I try to explain this to the family members that I still talk to, of why universal health care will help me, why Trump and people that are in power like Lindsey Graham, that they are completely for and they completely support and everything like that. And I'm trying to explain to them, they're trying to take my rights away. They're trying to lock me up for not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Trying to explain that to them and them not getting it, and them lacking the empathy to even to their own relative, like somebody that they say they love. Like, I don't get it. They're just it bothers me really bad.
Understandable. I mean, if anything, your family are supposed to be the ones that are beside you no matter what.
Yeah. But no, that's just liberal news lying to me. No, like I actually watched a video of Trump saying it. So,
well, and whether or not it's even their intention, like the way that they're going about it, like the things that they're talking about doing, even if they have good intentions behind it, like I said, there's not enough definition there, and basically the way that it's set up, it can easily apply to anybody just because.
And just the ignorance behind it on them thinking that it's a good thing doesn't make it a good thing. Like, listen to people that actually live with it and have to deal with the stigma and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Trump's not a mental health expert. Lindsey Graham is not a mental health expert, but they're passing laws on that thing.
And you know, the other thing that really kind of gets me is that they're trying to target people who have like specifically like diagnosed issues. So what about all of these people that keep having all these mass shootings and everything, and it comes out later, it's like, oh, well, there were signs. Like, you know, that's not the same as like having a diagnosed issue. Like, there were signs is basically everybody coming back later and going, well, I guess if I think about it.
It makes sense now.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the people that you're really needing to catch aren't even going to be marked anyway.
Yeah.
Like, so really, what good is it even going to do?
Well, a lot of these cases, like, they don't even have a mental health history. They get diagnosed after they commit the crime.
Exactly. So, I mean, you're not taking away the guns from the people that are actually committing these mass shootings.
Yeah. It's like Minority Report. They're trying to, like, turn this into the Minority Report, the Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, except they don't even have anything that can predict the future.
Yeah, like the little psychic kids.
Yeah.
And the little albino psychic kids in the pool.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Although that being said,
I think they were albino, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe they were bald. I don't know.
But But anyways, even if they did have them, I don't think that's a good idea anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the entire point of the movie.
Yeah, it was a horror movie. I mean, really, it was like a maybe not like your typical horror movie,
like
but
kind
it's
of the extreme like idea of like Big Brother is watching kind of thing.
Yeah, and
like Orwellian horror.
Yeah, it's fucking sad. But I think we'll end it there, and hope you join us next time when we have something more to podcast. No, I said that wrong. Did I say it wrong?
I think you said
something more to
join
podcast.
us next time when we have something more to podcast.
Okay, I said it right then.
I think you said something more to podcast.
Yeah.